Looks like we're live. So let's go ahead and start the stream. Sorry I was a little late. I was eating a carrot. Yeah, so I was doing some last minute stuff here. I was trying to get the help text done for the property management window. I think I've got it good enough for this release. Basically describes how to do it. Yeah, so you can show the property areas, move around and see different claimed areas of the world. All that's mostly working. And so we are going to finish up the last little bits. I'm going to commit that real quick. So I just made the help text. That was this stuff here. Eventually I'll move these to files, not hard-coded in the code, but this works for now. Property management screen. So today we will be doing the last bit of check. So I think I just did this. Yeah, so both 683 and 687 have been done. So I'll go over here. I will mark them done. 683, 687. If we come back over here and prioritize, we can see what's left to do. Some of these I'm going to push off because they turn out to only be an issue so like 650, let's look at it over here. So this is like the triage I do like right before I finish a release. I go through and see what really needs to be done. So the inventory dragging bug, I believe it turns out to be no talkie from me. Okay. All right. Thanks, Ron. So inventory dragging starts with the wrong sizes and leaves doo-doo. This actually was related to a bad character. One of my demo characters ended up having two backpacks, and so when you open the inventory, you have two backpacks stacked on top of each other. That turns out to really confuse the drag and drop code, but I'm not 100% sure I've fixed it, so I'm just going to push it off for now because I don't have a won't fix status on this. When the host exits the game, that I'm going to push off to probably till next release, which is not pre-alpha is like my target future release. And in fact, I'm going to have to change that number because there will be a 4 release, which I'll do for Halloween. So anyway, we move those to pre-alpha. Any other live birthday? Yeah, so move initial character. So yeah, I do want to do that. I want to try anyway. Detailed who command, I actually can do that later because it only affects the standalone server. This is the one I want to definitely tackle today. We had, one player that tried on a Mac and got farther than the other player who tried on a Mac with the newest code, but the far terrain failed. And so anyway, it would be nice to be able to have configurable settings that could set the visualization settings that are on like the debug panel and eventually other things. So they could edit a file and say, turn these things off to see if the game will run. Then they could go in and try to turn them back on and see if the game fails. This other one, I call it a birthday release because I meant to do this on July 31st, which was my birthday. So we're a month and a week late at this point. And it feels like, why do I set these deadlines if I'm constantly going to miss them? And I will tell you that this past weekend, I spent hours and hours and hours, cranking away on issues trying to get things done. And because I had that deadline in mind, to try to get it on Monday, which was a holiday. And I can guarantee you that if I hadn't set that deadline for myself, even if I missed the deadline, if I hadn't set it for myself, I would not have worked that hard over the weekend. So these arbitrary deadlines that I miss are useful because they force me to work a little harder sometimes. So yes, this one, the idle dedicated server. So this concerns me. If you run the standalone server, which you guys haven't had access to yet, Just the server on its own with no UI or anything takes basically a full CPU core on my 6-core box. It's like 13% something of the total CPU, and that's concerning. And I do want to address that, but not for tonight's release. I sort of feel like this might be, looking into that might be an interesting live stream all its own. And I'm hesitant to do that on this particular computer that I normally do live streams on, because this particular computer, if it overheats, the graphics card tends to blue screen the operating system. And so I'm just worried about having the profiler running and a dedicated server and trying to connect with the client all in the same box. Whereas I have my 6-core box, which is rock solid. If it overheats, it just sounds like a jet engine because it's got tons of fans that just spin up. So anyway, I'm going to push this one off. I do think that it might be fun for developers to see, how I would approach that. Why is it taking so much time and running in Visual VM, seeing what's going on. Yeah, I already pushed that one off. So this is a bug I'm going to push off. It's not critical because if you toggle the visualization on and off again, it shows up. I'm just going to be dragged into properties where we don't have perps. I fixed this. That one's done as well. So then we can go back over to this screen and see how we fall out. The other one I was going to push off is the third-person camera scene clip. Right now, if you run in third-person mode, I don't know if you guys have played with this before. I don't want to spend too much time explaining things because I do want to get into the actual work. But so let's use so demo girl's the one that's broken. That's got buggy inventory. So if we're in here and I don't think I can place things there. Yeah, I can. Okay. So let's say there's some blocks here. Let me just see if I'm... Okay, nope, see, I'm still... See, if I tried to place a block in here, it's not... Oh, it's not supposed to let me. Well, that explains another bug. Okay. So that's a bug I have to fix. So anyway, if you had like all these blocks here, and we're down in here, and you did into third-person mode, you basically can see right through these blocks, and your camera doesn't clip. So that's a bug I have to fix, but right now it's actually kind of useful for debugging. If I need to see inside walls, it's a super quick way to do it. So I'm going to leave that in for this release, and maybe work on that for the next one. It requires some enhanced physics collision on the client. It's normally done on the server, etc. So we're going to that one, 328. That's an old one. So you guys might accidentally see future plans here as I scroll through all the other stuff that's got to happen, because it's my master task list. Super secret sauce. Okay, so we're going to move that one off to future. Once I get this release out, hopefully tonight, and then tomorrow, the first thing I do when I get started, we'll come through this spreadsheet and sort of pick out the things I want to try to get done for the Halloween release, which I have not given a label to, and I'll change this label to gray, or this label to gray, and the next one to yellow, and so or red. Anyway, so now we should have just the things that I want to work on left. Nope, that one's got to go away. And so 642 and 603 I'm also going to push off. Is it 602? Oh no, this one, 603. The caching doesn't really matter because we won't be taxing the server so much. And 642. The idea behind this was that when you create a hosted world and you create your world for the first time, it's got that initial world setup has a lot of work to do, and I thought it'd be nice if you could just see a progress report that, like, as soon as you got to the host management screen, it would start kicking off the generation of that terrain in the background, so that the first player that joined didn't have to wait for it. But really, a server admin could work around this by just joining the server and waiting for all those things to come and then exiting back out again. So I'm going to push that off. It's a nice to have, not a requirement. And so now we're back down to the minimum stuff that I'm going to try to get in, which is configurable settings. And if there's time, I'll move the initial character setup to scripted hooks. The reason I want to do that is because, well, A, it's the right solution for that, because right now it's all hard-coded in the Java files. But B, it means that stuff is callable from scripts, and I could write server admin commands in case somebody's inventory gets corrupted or something. I could use the admin commands to reset their initial character inventory and stuff. So it is important, but it might not be important for tonight, only if there's time. And I do want to kind of go over how object scripting works, and so that would be interesting for the live stream. So if this goes super fast, we'll do that. So what we're talking about here is initially what I want to do. Those of you who played the game and drilled into the menus a little bit, I should have just left this running while I was talking. Yeah, and I do have to make a log cleanup pass to super verbose logging. So once in the game, you have this settings screen where you've got the rendering and the debug. And specifically this one, I would like to be able to have these settings pulled from a config file. I mean, definitely these, right? The enabled, the clip, the far trees, far structures, and terrain level. These at minimum, and smooth lighting, yeah. So at minimum, those things, because you know, if there's some problem with a shader on a certain hardware, you know, these things could be turned off, and the terrain level could be brought down to 0, and that sets it more like you know, traditional block world game with no far terrain, and that limits us to just the one block shader and nothing advanced. Well, it's not really advanced, it's just one fewer thing to go wrong, right? So this screen, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a screenshot of this, just so that I have sort of something to look at while the app's not running. So we got the screenshot. I'm going to exit out. So there's our screenshot, and probably we don't need it so big. Yeah, that's good enough. Okay, and then the window that handles this is, let's see. Do I already have it open? Nope. Yeah, the other thing I do after I cut the release is I close all these files and start over again. So let's start over here. Leave UI. I think I've lumped these all into the in-game menu state. Yeah. So this is where all of those settings start, and so there's a couple different ways to handle this. All of these are on the world view state, so we could modify world view state to look up config. Let me talk about that for a second. I think I don't have the file open already. The client already has a config file, Mythruna config, and currently it's just got yeah, like the library, where to find the worlds. It usually goes in your Mythruna 2 directory, Mythruna client config, and usually just, you know, points to where to find the worlds relative to where this config file is. I expanded it to, did I? No, maybe I didn't. It will get expanded to include you know, startup scripts and things. Oh, there's a server config that has more stuff. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this to include like a map of properties that all the other application can look at for their startup settings, and eventually make it so that if you change settings in the game, it'll write them back to this file so that it'll be easier to tweak. But for today, we're just going to start with reading the values, and it'll be a little squishy. We'll just make it like a hash map with some utility methods. So we need to add that support. So once we have an instance, let's call it string object config. No. Settings, startup settings. And normally it'll get filled in, but every time we load it, we initialize defaults, so we can say, is that true every time? No, so we need to add the upgrade path as well. Yeah, so this dot startup settings, let's do hash map, and we'll make an upgrade. It's the first time I've had to upgrade, so. And so this is where we'll set up stuff that was missing if we loaded the file and it didn't have it. And then we just have to make sure that every time we load that, where do we load it? Load. Okay, so if it already exists, we load it, we upgrade it. If it didn't exist, we make a new one, which initializes the default and stores it. So actually we should say, and then store it again, store it then too. So if we upgraded it, then we'll store it back. Boolean changed. And now we're set up in case we have future things that we want. Eventually there'll be client-side mod scripts and things that we'll want to potentially load here too. So we got that. Now we're going to add some convenience methods. Let's see. Get int, yeah, for the startup settings, string key default. You know what? Get startup setting string key t default value. So then if startup settings contains key, but Paul, why don't you just get the value and return the value? Well, because the value might be null on purpose, and so we can't just check null. So return startup settings get key, and we do the bad thing, casting to t, which means we need press warnings, my favorite annotation. So if it contains the key, we return the value. Otherwise, we return the default value, which is already t. Generic types, yay! I wonder if anybody else joined the live stream. Oops. Just the one viewer. Oh. Yeah, they don't like my resolution. Okay, so we've got, let's just see if we can still compile. Alright, so we've got the ability to do settings. Now let's use those settings. Mythruna config, get instance, and then we should be able to just get startup setting. Okay. So heading over here, let's grab Mythruna config. sure we have. Oh, we are not in alphabetical order. Yes, I know, an IDE would have filled that in for me, and then I would have been completely unaware where I sucked it in. Okay, so what we want to do is things like things that we default to true. We can say, see, these reflect, so this is a Mythruna property panel. One of the extensions is the property panel, which you can just add these Boolean properties and it sets this up for you, you know, with checkboxes or whatever the type is, you know, Boolean properties shows up as a checkbox, you know, int and double properties show up as these sliders. So we've already got that, and they'll reflect whatever this value was when they started, and so we can actually, if we enable or disable this state based on a setting, and yeah, so this always gets added. So we should be able to say set enabled config.get startup setting HUD stats state enabled, and we want the default to be true because that's our current default. Okay, so if we did that right, I ought to be able to control whether the HUD stats show up when we start up. So we should be able to test that. You know what I can do is delete my Mythruna config. Then when I run, it's going to create a new one that will already have the, whoopsie, I'm missing a parenthesis. Yep. Okay. Okay. Hey Paul, do you never face issues with typos when writing variable name? I mean, sometimes, but that's what I compile often, and I will notice the typo usually. I got my start as, like, you know, a million years ago in the 80s. I used to be a technical writer for I was in high school, and I was a technical writer, because it turns out when you're taking high school English, you're like well up on grammar, certainly better than your average. Well, not necessarily better than your average person, but you're definitely having to take tests and stuff on it, so you can stand it okay as a technical writer. So that was one of the things I did, and then after that, I did a lot of data entry. So, you know, accuracy and so on and so forth. I make typos all the time, and then the compiler catches them. I just go fix them. Oh, I don't need to go all the way through here. I got sidetracked. So yeah, I do make typos, but they're quick, and like what I get for that is that when I type a key, it goes in instantly. I don't have to. There's no delay. Never a delay. Okay, so exit the game. We should be able to look at the Mythruna client. Oh, it did not make one. Oh, it put it in the. Oh, I wrote it out again. I didn't have to do that. Yeah, so see, it already had done it. So just move this over here for testing. So I should be able to open that up. We'll open it up next to where we are. I think it's time to move my screenshots to a different directory. Okay, so we have the settings area now. We can come in here, and we had it called, we called this key. Yeah, I do a lot of cut and pasting too, so for really long variable names, I just cut and paste them. So we want HUD state. Let's try HUD state enabled false, because that's different than what we start with. So now when I start up, the HUD should be disabled automatically. And we shall see, do we get the stuff on the right? It's looking pretty good. I don't know, we still get the heap. Yeah, okay, we haven't actually initialized that stuff yet, I guess. Let's try here. Nope, it worked. Yep, HUD's gone. That's nice. I can start, if I want to take screenshots, I can start up without the HUD and I don't have to go into the settings. Oops, wrong menu. So yeah, so now over here, yeah, so the debug HUD was already off. Pretty nice. Cool. So that's working. So let's add some more settings. Yeah, I mean, one of the things is I've been coding so long that IDEs, if when they existed at all, I mean, Microsoft Programmer's Workbench and stuff like that, we're talking about a long time ago. VI and Emacs was the most advanced you had, and which, you know, certainly better than like Edlin and some of the other things people started with. So you just get used to certain techniques to avoid lots of recompiles. So let's do similar here. And so we'll say worldview state, worldview state. Okay, so that would enable or disable the block world. And we can set the clip as view radius. So similar to this, we'll set view radius, and for that default we will use, what is the current default? It's not 7. Yeah, I mean, like, you get used to it, right? You've gotten used to that. I never had a chance to get used to it, so it doesn't really bother me. I find it distracting on some level, but again, that's me because my background, and I've had to work in lots of environments where I just didn't have access to that. You're SSH'd into a server that then you SSH into another server and SSH into another server, and you still have to work. And so you get really good at reading code that's all black and white without colors, and you just remember things and you look at them. Yeah, so I've devoted parts of my brain to things that you guys didn't have to. You may have an advantage on that. So what is the default? Well, it's whatever get world state says was the default. So world view state, because I don't want to override. Do I not have world view state open? I do not. Well, that's good. I can just open it here then. Yeah. Terminals, yeah. But not VI and the editors that you would use. View, worldview state. Worldview state, the default is view radius. Default is 3, I guess. Oh, you know what? I could have just looked over here. Yes, the default is 3. I'm an idiot. So default there is 3. Smooth lighting. Let's go ahead and do that. So that's, we'll call that smooth lighting. And that is definitely true by default. And set smooth lighting. No, we don't want it to, we don't want to calibrate view map. It's debugging. These we definitely want to set, so set enabled, And we want this to be the tree state. Alright, do that same thing for point cloud state. Oh, there's a trick, right? Var structures in the code is called point cloud state. That's a hint on how I did it. Super sneaky. So in this case, we want to set our own terrain level to config, get startup setting. Let's call it what do we call this? Debug settings terrain level. And we want the default to be 2, I think. Yeah. Oops. Alright. And I think that's all we want to control. Let's see if it compiles. Alright. Compiles and runs. Let's see if it keeps our usual defaults. And then we'll go monkey with settings. Okay, so all the stuff is still on, except for the HUD, which we turned off. So we head over here. Yeah. So those are okay to turn on. Yeah, those are kind of fun. You can see what the terrain looks like. So if we turn off blocks, you can see this is what the var terrain looks like without any local blocks. And then you can also see how the buildings get rendered. The far buildings, because there's no local blocks rendered. That's what the far building looks like. That's why it's basically just a big point cloud. It's a trick that should not work, but it works surprisingly well, even considering that I had planned to do something more advanced with this, and you know, from far away, it turns out not to matter, because it slowly starts to look like a block structure at even just a reasonable distance. So anyway, that's the super secret sauce on how that works. That's why these look so funny. Alright, so that's all working like it's supposed to. Let's add some settings to see. And so here I'll cheat again. Lots of cutting and pasting. So we've got this startup setting, which I already did. This startup setting, which I already did. That one I have not done yet. Okay. Oh, yeah. Wrong one. So we've got these different startup settings that I configured. And this is what I'm talking about. I like to cut and paste. So now I can take this over to the config file. And do a test where I set all of these to something different. So we want that to be false. We want, we'll leave that true, because then we want to see at least something. So we'll set this to view radius 1, something ridiculous. Smooth lighting, sure, let's check that. False. Trees enabled. False. So this would be the almost everything off version. And then terrain level 0. Okay, so that should be what a config file looks like that turns almost everything off and the view radius way down. Even smooth lighting is off. Okay, so this should look pretty ridiculous. Let's see if it loads. So far. All right, let's play. What do we got? Oh no. Oh no. Problems. Yeah, we got a double cannot be cast to class integer. So that's in there on line 144. 144. Okay, so this is a tricky problem because terrain level. Why is it interpreting? Oh, it loaded it as a double because that's the way. That's the way JSON works. It loaded that as a double object. And so we've got a problem. Let us... Okay, so we know it's going to be double. So let's put it in the realm of double. And we'll add a set train. I'm just going to cheat. I don't want to deal with this too much. Okay, that should get us past that problem. Dope. See, the IDE would have caught that, wouldn't it? Okay, continue last world. I click these buttons a lot. Oh, and by the way, this is the new UI styling that I started on the last live stream, finished up later. Oh yeah, check it out. This is like way back, you know, Minecraft 0.04 with Mythruna graphics. Yeah, of course this fractal's not set up for this short clip distance, so it creates really big terrain features. That's why it doesn't work well. If we went settings, so if we wanted to, like if this was old Mythruna, you know, it would be up here like this. And we'd had a different fractal that wouldn't generate so tall. And we'd be able to, oops. Yeah, so we'd be able to see, that's what it would have been like. And the fog distancing was different too. Yeah, you know, whenever I have to do, that's one thing I do actually have IntelliJ installed, and if I boot it up, it's to do like basically code analysis. Though, you know, day-to-day check style or PMD, they work pretty well, integrated into the build. Anybody who has access to the MOS code, if you're a patron, you can get early access to the MOS code, which is the libraries that underpin Mythruna. I have the check styles broken. I think I finally turned it off because it fails for a lot of things that I put in that I do want to take care of someday, but at any rate. So actually this doesn't look too bad. I mean, I could play this game. In fact, we did. All of us, anybody who played old Mythruna basically played this game right here for hours and hours and hours on end. But, you know, it's not as cool as having all this stuff turned back up. You know, suddenly now we have like render distance for days. So it's much better. But anyway, now we have the ability to turn that off for players that are working on, well, look at all that. That is a far clip on the block world. Yeah, whatever 7 times 32 is, that's how far of a clip we've got there. it's reasonable. If we turn back on the debug HUD, we should be able to get, yeah, we're at 60% memory. That's the fun thing about the idle animation that's physics-based, because sometimes she'll slide along because the idle animation is pushing us against something. Yeah, like if you see, or she'll be standing next to here, and the idle animation will slowly make us fall off the, or pushed up here. Yeah. There's some weird challenges to overcome there, but anyway, that's Mythruna girl. Oh. Alright, so that feature works. I think that's all I want to do with that particular feature. I still miss Norman too, yeah. Oh yeah, you played on the release day? Man, yeah, Norman and I and several other folks, I don't know if you were one, were full on addicted to that game, and that development basically stopped once the server went live, and all of my development from that point on for the next month or so was focused on developing new commands on the server to help combat griefing and just usability improvements there, as we played hours and hours and hours just chipping away at the world and adding cities, and Norman had his whole little continent that he built with a beach resort. Stuff was fun. Okay, let me commit this. You know what, I'm gonna go ahead and tag it with the, I don't always do this, but sometimes I try to tag it with the thing. Added configurable startup settings to Mythruna config. Paste that into the debug HUD settings so that things can be disabled. Startup. Alright, so that's one more thing done. And we're still got 15 minutes to play. Oh yeah, I am creature. I figured I actually recognized both your picture and the name was familiar too for some reason. But yeah. So, oh, I lost the bubble on what I was doing. Oh yeah, so 674. Task we've completed. Done. So now we can refresh my pivot table here. See all the things that were done up here, and the one thing to do down here, which is just to move initial character setup. And we can look at the summary over here, which is nice to see the roll up, and we're at 98% on the task count and 95% on the score. And for those who weren't on this live stream last time, the score is based on, I sort of give a story points, if you're familiar with Scrum and other agile things, to give story points which amount of complexity. But to that I add sort of a uncertainty, the risk. One is, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the simplest thing ever, and no extra risk. Whereas like here, I think, oh, I think it's a little bit complicated, and I'm not real sure about it, so maybe it'll take double that, or and so that this times this is where we get the score, and so that is where these scores come from. And so we're really close, 95%, because I believe that whatever, what are we working on next? Oh yeah, the initial character set hooks. Yeah, so I have this as a 3 complexity, which there's no way I should ever be able to complete that in this live stream if it was really a 3 complexity, but and there's a 2 risk, so it may be a little overblown, but when I wrote this up, that was a long time before I'd even implemented the object stuff. What we're talking about is taking this stuff where I create the build wand in code, I create the backpack in code, and I create items in code, and then I've hard-coded. Yeah, so when we create the backpack, we automatically fill it with a sword, an axe, a book, an object tool. Later on, the wand gets added. I might just go over what I'm going to do and then not actually do that on the live stream because we're going to run out of time. I do want to try to keep these short to an hour. Well, short like an hour without going too far over. So like for the build one, for example, In this case, we try to see if the player already has one. If they do, I actually nuke it because we reset it up every time. That's also something I want to stop doing because the object system's mostly defined now. So basically, we don't want to see if they already have one. If they don't have one, and actually that I don't want to do anymore either. I want to put a or a character creation hook in, and whenever a character is created, we give them the backpack and all the stuff in the backpack. And then I don't have to check every time. And then I'll add like a admin command if we have to add it again. But essentially, we want to move this to a script so that the build wand is built when the player's created. Same with the backpack and filling it with the items. You know, we want to capture this bit into one of the object scripts. And object scripts actually make this look they're actually a lot simpler. So for example, we could take we've got a lot of hard-coded stuff in here. So I'm going to sort of gloss over how this is going to work because there's a little more detail here than I want to go over in the next 10 minutes. But there's these object scripts as the base objects, standard objects. There's a base objects.groovy standard tools. We'll go ahead and put it in standard tools, for example. So yeah, so when a player is created, we would want to create the backpack on them, which would look something like, you know, I cut and paste this over here as reference. This is not actually going to work, but it would be something like def backpack equals create entity, and then to this we would then do our you know, shape info create, you know, all this stuff. Some of this I'm gonna, as I go, I'm gonna make it a little nicer because some of this that's too much in my opinion. Like we have to reference magic properties and things. So item scale I think is like 0.0125 or something. I'm gonna look these up after I get off the call. Yeah, so see, we've hard coded the attachment point here too, which is not something I'd normally do. Yeah, so I hope to like clean this stuff up a little as I was doing it. Yeah, so basically all these things get put in here. And then we would have a, we would have to put, so it would be created on the back of the entity, I think it's player. And so if we, in theory, if we ran this, of course we're missing, you know, item scale and some other variables that we need, the rotation and things, which I did in here. And normally, so I'm rambling, I know, but normally when we define objects, we define things like their handle location, and for the backpack I would probably define its attachment location so that I didn't have to hard code that into here. I would just look it up for the type. You know, the backpack in general would have that rather than calculating it from item scale and these hard coded numbers because I just happen to know how big the model is. So, you know, that's halfway across the backpack in those two directions. Yeah, and eventually I want to incorporate this object type, object name stuff into just a create object that automatically looks up the object type info based on the type you pass and things. And I may get that done for this script. I do want to cut a release tomorrow, so, and this technically doesn't have to be done because everything is working right now. So if I get some time tonight to poke at this a little more, I'll implement this. Otherwise, this feature will get pushed to the next release, and maybe I'll do a live stream on it where I actually implement it. So for now, I'm going to delete this because, you know, there's no way it would work without those missing variables, inner size, and so on. And I want to think about it a little bit. So we may be ready for the release. I may push this off. Did I actually change anything? I think so I did. White space. Bane of my existence. All right. think if there are no questions, that I will give it like 30 seconds as I go ahead and I'll leave this on here for now. Because again, I'm gonna look at it later before I cut the release. By the way, advice to you: if you have an application that has more than one release step, when you cut a release for the very first time, start a notes file where you write down everything you did to make that release. And then if you change things, you can go back and update it. But the second time I went to cut a release, I was so happy I had this file, because I'm like, wait, it's been 2 months. There was something I did with jar replacement. Do I have to do that again? I have to flip it. And I was just able to follow this step by step. I made 1 or 2 corrections. And so this is how I release Mythruna right now, until I have a more automated process, which some of it has to do with the versions of things I'm using and things. But so in general, good practice. To all of my fellow JME developers or developers out there, I hope you have success with your projects and find ways to be motivated and super productive. If you are users of my libraries, I hope that you are finding them useful, and let me know if you have any problems or things that you want to add. And otherwise, go forth and have a good week, and I will do one of these again on next Friday, and we'll be working on the Halloween release at that point. And I'm not sure exactly what we'll do. Hopefully be something fun, because I want to try to do maybe a couple Halloween themed features if I can get them in. All right, thanks guys, and I will see you next time.